I was clinging to life in a cold hospital room when the doctors called my sons, but instead of rushing to my side, they stayed at a glittering gala raising glasses of champagne while my heart nearly gave out. That night I realized decades of sacrifice meant nothing to them, so I made a choice no mother ever imagines. I would disappear, leaving only a letter behind that would haunt them forever. What happened next changed all of our lives in ways they never expected. If you enjoy powerful life stories like this one, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now let me take you back to the night when everything began. The storm that night felt like a warning. Rain hammered against the cracked windows of my apartment, and the city of Raventon pulsed with distant sirens and flashing lights. I had been restless for weeks, waking in the middle of the night with a strange pressure in my chest, but I told myself it was only nerves. I did not want to trouble my sons again. They already thought I exaggerated too much, that every ache and every pain was nothing more than me craving attention. So I stayed silent, convincing myself that everything would be fine. But that night, when the pain finally struck with its full force, I knew it was something I could not ignore. It started as a dull ache, a heavy stone pressed against my chest, then quickly turned into searing fire. My left arm went numb, my vision blurred, and I collapsed against the cold wooden floor. In the moments before darkness swallowed me, I remember one clear thought racing through my mind. This is how it ends, and I am completely alone. When I woke again, I was strapped to machines in the emergency ward of Raventon General Hospital. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like angry bees, and the air smelled of antiseptic and fear. A mask covered my face, pumping oxygen into lungs that felt like they were drowning. I could hear voices around me, hurried and urgent, but they sounded muffled as though carried on a strong wind. I caught fragments. Heart attack, multiple arrests, critical condition, doctor. Halden, the physician in charge, leaned close enough for me to see the deep lines carved into his face. Mrs. Vera, you are very lucky to be alive. We had to revive you twice on the way here. He paused, his expression darkening. We tried to call your family. We told them it might be your last chance. Those words landed like ice in my veins. My last chance. Later, when the night nurse Rosa sat beside me, she told me everything in hushed tones. The doctors had called both of my sons. They explained my condition, told them my life was hanging by a thread, begged them to come quickly. But Marcus, my eldest, had said he could not possibly abandon the gala his wife Clara was hosting. Important people had traveled from far away, and he could not leave in the middle of such an event. Adrian, my younger boy, gave nearly the same answer. He said they would come in the morning after the celebration, that I was strong enough to last the night. As Rosa spoke, I stared at the pale green walls of the hospital room and listened to the steady beep of the heart monitor. Each sound was a reminder that I was alive yet utterly abandoned. I pictured my sons just blocks away, dressed in black suits, laughing and clinking glasses under chandeliers while I lay here on the edge of death. The image burned itself into my mind sharper than any knife. Time slowed to a crawl in that cold room. The storm outside raged on, but inside the hospital everything was still except for the machines that kept me alive. I wanted to believe my sons would come rushing through the door at any moment, their faces full of worry, their voices begging me to hold on. But the hours passed one after another, and no footsteps echoed in the hallway, no door creaked open, only silence, heavy and suffocating. At one point, Dr. Halden came back to check on me. His eyes betrayed the truth before his words did. I spoke to your sons again. I told them about your condition. His voice faltered for just a moment. They said the gala was too important to leave. He adjusted the IV drip, avoiding my gaze as though ashamed on their behalf. I turned my face away, staring at the rain that streaked across the hospital window. My chest ached, but not just from the attack. It was the ache of betrayal, of realizing that to my children a party was worth more than my life. Around 2 a.m, Rosa returned to check my vitals. She spoke gently, her voice carrying the kind of compassion I had not felt from my family in years. Mrs. Vera, you need to rest. Your heart is very weak. Please try to stay calm. Stay calm. How could I? My own flesh and blood had chosen champagne and laughter over my final moments. I closed my eyes, but sleep would not come. Instead, memories began to flood in memories of years long past when my sons were small, when I thought love alone would be enough to keep us bound together. I remembered the nights I spent sewing clothes until dawn to afford Marcus his soccer lessons. I remembered walking through snow in worn-out boots to deliver food to Adrian's boarding school when he forgot his lunch. I remembered the years after their father disappeared when I became both mother and father, carrying the weight of survival on my own shoulders. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every penny saved was for them. And now when my body gave out, they were nowhere to be found. The beeping of the monitor seemed louder with each passing minute. My heart stumbled, then steadied, then stumbled again as though uncertain whether to continue. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm and waiting for footsteps that never came. Hours slipped by. At one point I thought I heard voices in the hallway and hope flared inside me. But it was only another patient being wheeled past. Rosa gave me a sympathetic look, but I could not meet her eyes. Hope was too painful. By dawn, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The city outside was waking up, taxis honking and vendors calling out on street corners. Life was returning to Raventon, but inside my room I remained frozen in time, a ghost tethered to machines. I could almost picture Marcus and Adrian still at the gala, still laughing as though nothing had happened. Maybe they were toasting their successes, shaking hands with powerful guests, proudly introducing their wives. Maybe someone even asked them where their mother was, and perhaps they smiled politely, brushing the question aside. A deep anger began to rise within me, sharper than the pain in my chest. For years I had convinced myself that their distance was temporary, that work and obligations explained their absence. But tonight stripped away all illusions. The truth was undeniable now. To them I was a burden, an afterthought, a shadow. When Rosa came in again near sunrise, she found me awake, my eyes fixed on the window. She asked if I was thinking about something that upset me. I almost laughed at the question. If only she knew the weight pressing down on me. If only she knew how heavy betrayal could feel. As the first light of morning spread across the city, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time I ever lay waiting for my sons to choose me. This would be the last night I begged for love from people who no longer cared whether I lived or died. And yet even with that promise burning inside me, I felt a deep pull of sorrow. How had it come to this? How had decades of devotion led to such abandonment? Questions circled in my mind like vultures, and the answers were buried in the years behind me. The storm outside had passed, but inside my heart a different storm was beginning to form. A storm of memories, of sacrifices, of a past that could no longer be ignored. And as I lay there weak but awake, I knew I had to face it all. Every choice, every scar, every moment that had brought me to this lonely hospital bed. Because the truth of who I was and how I had been forgotten was written not in this single night, but in the long, painful history that had led here. And that history was about to come rushing back to me. The storm outside had calmed, but the one inside me had only begun. As the morning light crept into the hospital room, my mind drifted backward through the years, pulling me into memories I had buried beneath duty and survival. Each recollection rose like a wave, and I could no longer hold them back. I was 28 when Victor, my husband, walked out of our lives. He left with another woman and never looked back. I remember the day clearly, the sound of the door slamming, the hollow silence afterward, and the stunned faces of my two little boys. Marcus was barely 8, old enough to understand something had shattered. Adrian was just 4, clinging to my skirt and asking when Daddy would be home. I swallowed my own grief because there was no time for tears. Someone had to feed them, clothe them, and keep a roof over their heads. That someone was me. The years that followed carved lines into my face and calluses into my hands. I worked anywhere that would hire me. Mornings began in the textile mill, where the roar of machines drowned out every thought. Afternoons were spent scrubbing hospital floors, the smell of bleach burning my nose as I pushed the mop back and forth. At night, when exhaustion should have broken me, I sat at a small sewing machine stitching clothes until my fingers bled. Each coin I earned went to food, school supplies, rent. I told myself the struggle was worth it because my boys deserved better. I remember their faces in those early years. Marcus had a stubborn set to his jaw, a seriousness that made him seem older than he was. Adrian was gentler, always looking for comfort in the warmth of my embrace. When illness struck, I sat by their bedside, singing lullabies until their fevers broke. When they needed shoes, I wore the same coat for 6 winters so they could walk proudly to school. When they needed books, I skipped meals so they would never feel the shame of being unprepared. Every sacrifice was a stone I laid to build their future. Yet as I lay in the hospital now, I wondered whether they ever noticed the foundation beneath their feet. Years passed. Marcus became the ambitious one, always talking about success, status, and wealth. When he met Clara, everything changed. She was sharp, polished, and calculating. The first time she stepped into my modest home, her eyes swept across the room with thinly veiled judgment. She told Marcus they should spend Christmas with her family instead, because their traditions were more refined. That was the first Christmas I spent alone, the turkey I had saved for sitting untouched in the refrigerator. Adrian followed a similar path a few years later when he met Celine. Unlike Clara, Celine did not openly criticize. She preferred soft remarks that sliced quietly. She would compliment my clothes, then call them vintage, with a smile that felt more like pity than praise. She pushed for lighter meals, cleaner decorations, fewer gatherings. Soon my Sunday dinners, once the anchor of our family, were dismissed as unnecessary effort. Invitations grew scarce until they stopped altogether. I told myself they were busy, that new marriages demanded time, that distance was natural. But deep inside, I knew something was shifting. I was becoming an outsider in my own family. The real wounds, however, were carved by the choices I made in their favor. Marcus dreamed of a grand home, one that Clara had described as perfect. They lacked the down payment, so I sold the only place that truly belonged to me, a lakeside cottage where my boys had grown up. I moved into a cramped apartment with peeling paint and no elevator while Marcus and Clara stepped into their dream house. I still remember Clara at the door the first time I visited. She smiled tightly and said I should have called first because they were expecting guests. She did not even invite me inside. I stood in the rain with a cake I had baked, one that Marcus used to beg for as a child. She took it from me reluctantly, reminding me that Marcus was on a strict diet for his cholesterol. I walked back down the street, my chest heavy with something far worse than shame. Adrian, too, came to me when his business faltered. He needed money quickly, he said, and without it he would drown in debt. I had saved for years, tucking away every spare coin to build a safety net for my old age. It was not much, but it was all I had. I handed it to him without hesitation, trusting that he would make things right. Within months, the business collapsed, and my savings were gone. He shrugged it off, saying failure was part of the game, but for me it was not a game. It was survival. I kept giving because that is what mothers do. I kept hoping that love would someday be repaid with love. But now, lying in that hospital bed, I saw the pattern clearly. They had grown accustomed to my sacrifices, so accustomed that they no longer recognized them as sacrifices at all. Rosa entered quietly, checking my blood pressure, adjusting the tubes, watching me with concern. I could see questions in her eyes, questions she dared not ask. She sensed the weight pressing down on me was not only physical but something far deeper. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain decades of devotion met with indifference? How could I explain the way neglect stings more than cruelty? The hours dragged on, each one filled with memories that returned uninvited. I saw myself younger, stronger, pushing a stroller through icy streets. I saw the small cottage lit with laughter and warmth. I saw the long nights alone, bent over a sewing machine, whispering promises to myself that someday it would all be worth it. And then I saw the present, the empty chair beside my bed, the silence of the phone, the laughter drifting faintly from a gala where my children toasted under golden lights. By afternoon, the weight of it all became unbearable. I pressed my hand against my chest, not because of pain, but because I could feel something inside me breaking. It was not my heart, though. It had already betrayed me once. It was something deeper, something invisible. It was the last fragile thread that had bound me to the belief that I still mattered. I realized then that this night, this storm, this betrayal was not an isolated moment. It was the culmination of a lifetime. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every ounce of myself I had given had led here. And here in this sterile hospital room, I saw the truth as clear as the rain-streaked window. To my sons, I was no longer a mother. I was an obligation, one easily postponed for champagne and applause. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my face, and whispered to myself, it was never about money, never about the insults, never about the dinners missed. It was about love. And when it truly mattered, there was none left for me. As night crept in again, a question formed in my mind, sharp and insistent. If my sons could not choose me when I was dying, then who had I been living for all these years? The storm inside me raged louder than ever, and I knew I had to face the answer. And that answer would lead me to a choice I had never imagined making. Night fell again, and with it came a stillness that felt heavier than the storm from the night before. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting pale reflections on the polished floor. Rosa had dimmed the lamp beside my bed, but the shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, curling up the walls like smoke. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind no longer drifting through memories but fixed firmly on the present. This was the night everything inside me began to shift. For hours I had replayed my life like a film reel. The faces of my sons at 5 years old, their small hands reaching for mine, their voices calling me Mama. The cold winters when I wrapped my own coat around them, the endless work, the endless giving, and now the empty chair beside me, the silence of a phone that would not ring. Each recollection was a weight pressing harder on my chest, but underneath the pain a strange clarity had begun to take shape. It was as though a curtain had been lifted, and I could finally see my life for what it was, not what I had wished it to be. For decades I had defined myself as their mother, the one who held everything together. I had told myself that the sacrifices were temporary, that love would bring them back to me. But lying here weak and alone, I realized something far more brutal. They were not coming back. Not really. That truth settled over me like a blanket of ice. And then slowly something else rose beneath it. Not despair this time, but resolve. Rosa entered quietly to check my vitals. She glanced at the monitor, then at me. "Your blood pressure is up again," she murmured. "Are you thinking about something upsetting?" "I'm thinking about everything," I said, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been all night. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the chair. "Sometimes," she said softly, "thinking about everything is what finally makes people strong." I watched her for a moment. She could not have been more than 30, but her eyes carried a depth of understanding my own family lacked. When she left the room, I stared at the city lights flickering beyond the window. In the distance, music drifted faintly from some rooftop party, muffled by the rain-washed air. That was when I decided I would not lie here waiting for them anymore. The decision felt both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it meant stepping into the unknown. Liberating because it meant stepping out of a prison I had built myself. I could not make my sons value me, but I could choose to stop begging for their scraps of attention. I reached for the paper and pen Rosa had left on the table. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. It was the tremor of a dam breaking, of words that had been locked away for years, finally rushing free. "Dear Marcus and Adrian," I began. The pen scratched across the page, each letter a confession, each sentence a reckoning. "For 68 years I have lived for you. Every decision I made, every sacrifice I made, every dream I abandoned was for your well-being. Tonight, lying here after having been clinically dead twice, I finally understand that you have not lived a single day thinking about mine." The words poured out faster than I could think them. I wrote about Victor, leaving, about the jobs, the sleepless nights, the meals skipped, the savings lost. I wrote about the lakeside cottage I had sold for Marcus and the life savings I had handed to Adrian. I wrote about the insults disguised as advice from Clara and Celine, the way they had slowly shut me out of family gatherings. I wrote until tears blurred the ink. Then at the bottom of the page I wrote the sentence that changed everything. "By the time you read this, I will already be gone from your lives. Do not look for me. You will not find me." I put the pen down and sat back, my chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. The hospital room seemed different now, less like a cell and more like a waiting room for something new. When Rosa came back, she noticed the paper. "Writing letters?" she asked gently. "Something like that," I said. "I'm putting my life in order." Later that night, Marina arrived. She had been my neighbor for 20 years, the only person who had consistently shown up when I needed help. She brought a thermos of coffee and sat beside me, her hands warm around mine. I need your help, I said. She raised her eyebrows. Anything. I'm leaving, I whispered. Not tomorrow, not next week. Soon. I need you to give this letter to my sons after they visit, and I need you to help me disappear. For a moment, Marina simply stared at me, eyes wide. Disappear, Elena? Are you talking about harming yourself? No, I said firmly. I'm talking about starting over. I'm talking about rebirth. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. You've been planning this, haven't you? I didn't know it until tonight, I admitted. But yes, all these years, something inside me was waiting for this moment. I told her about the small account I had managed to keep hidden, the savings I had rebuilt quietly over the past 3 years. It was not much, but it was enough to start somewhere new. I told her about my cousin Isabel, who lived far away on the coast in a town called Graymore. We had not spoken in years, but she had always said her door was open. Marina listened without interrupting, then squeezed my hand. If you're sure about this, I'll help you, she said, but you must promise to call me when you're safe. I promise, I said. You're the only family I have left. We spent the next hour whispering plans. Marina would hold on to my letter until Sunday, when my sons were supposed to visit after their weekend commitments. By then, I would already be gone. She would tell them she did not know where I was because she truly would not know. When she left, Rosa peeked back in. You look different, she said. I feel different, I replied. For the first time in decades, I feel like myself. That night, as the hospital hummed with the muted sounds of machines and footsteps, I lay awake, not with dread but with anticipation. I imagined the coastal town of Graymore, the scent of salt in the air, the sound of gulls overhead. I imagined waking up in a room where no one knew my past. For the first time in years, the thought made me smile. But even as hope rose inside me, a flicker of fear lingered at the edges. Could I really leave everything behind? Could I really walk away from the life I had built around my children? I closed my eyes and saw their faces at the gala laughing while I lay dying. The answer came as clear as a bell. Yes, I could. I must. Outside, the rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the window like a heartbeat. I listened to it and thought of it as a signal, a drum roll before a long-delayed escape. I drifted off to sleep with the letter folded neatly beside me and my plan taking shape like a shadow in the dark. And when I woke the next morning, my heart no longer felt like a weight dragging me down. It felt like a key turning in a lock. What I did not know then was that my decision would not only change my life forever, but would ignite a chain of events that would shake my sons to their core and reveal secrets I had never suspected. Morning arrived, shrouded in gray clouds. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, streaking the hospital windows like tears. I sat upright in my bed, the folded letter resting on my lap. It felt heavier than paper, heavier than words. It felt like a lifetime compressed into a single envelope. My heart beat with a strange mix of exhaustion and anticipation. Rosa came in with my breakfast tray and paused when she saw me dressed in the same dark green dress she had admired the day before. You look like you're preparing for something, she said softly. I am, I replied, my voice calm. I'm preparing to leave. She glanced at the letter in my hands, then at me. You've made up your mind. Yes, I said. I have. It had taken me decades to gather the courage, but the decision had been made in a single night. I would not spend my remaining years waiting for my sons to remember I existed. I would not let my last breaths be spent staring at a door that never opened. Marina arrived shortly after 9 o'clock, her coat damp from the rain. She carried a small bag of my belongings from the apartment, a few clothes, my identification, and the cash I had quietly saved in an account my sons knew nothing about. $8,000. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to buy a bus ticket, rent a room, and start over somewhere far away. She sat beside me, her expression serious. Are you sure you're ready for this? I nodded. More ready than I've been for anything in my life. I spoke to your cousin Isabel, she said. She was surprised, but she sounded happy to help. She said you can stay as long as you need. Relief washed over me like a tide. I had not spoken to Isabel in 5 years, but I remembered her warmth, her independence, her gentle insistence that I deserved more than I allowed myself. Graymore might be a small coastal town, but in my mind it had become a beacon. While Marina unpacked the bag, Rosa slipped into the room with a clipboard. "My sister Sarah is waiting in the parking lot," she whispered. "She's a lawyer. She prepared all the papers you'll need." I blinked. "Papers, she'll explain everything," Rosa said. "It's to make sure you're legally protected after you leave. Power of attorney, proof of competency, that sort of thing." The thoroughness of their help stunned me. For so long I had felt invisible, and yet here were two women, practically strangers, moving heaven and earth to help me reclaim my life. By early afternoon, everything was in place. The letter lay neatly on the bedside table. Marina had memorized my instructions: wait until Sunday afternoon when my sons came to visit, then hand it to them. By then, I would be hundreds of miles away, unreachable. I picked up the envelope one last time, tracing my name on the front. Inside, my handwriting filled 4 pages. Every line was a testament, every paragraph a mirror held up to my son's choices. It was not written in anger. It was written in clarity, in the hard light of truth. I had written about Victor leaving, about the 3 jobs, about the lakeside cottage. I had written about how Marcus and Clara had stood in their grand dining room, serving imported wine while I sat in a hospital bed. I had written about Adrian's failed business and Celine's polite but persistent efforts to erase me from his life. And then I had written the words that freed me. "By the time you read this, I will already be gone. Do not look for me. This is not revenge. This is self-respect. This is love finally turned inward." Marina touched my arm. "Do you want to read it one more time?" "No," I said. "If I do, I might never stop crying. And I don't want tears to be the last thing they remember about me." As the hospital corridor filled with the soft shuffle of visitors and the scent of antiseptic, Rosa entered with a wheelchair. "We should go now," she whispered. "Shift change is at 7. It's the easiest time to slip out." I slid the letter back onto the pillow, making sure it was clearly visible. It looked so small there, a white rectangle against the pale sheets. Yet I knew those pages would shatter the world my sons had built, the one where they believed I would always be waiting. Rosa helped me into the wheelchair, draping a shawl over my shoulders. Marina gathered the bag. Together we moved down the hallway as though we were just another trio of visitors heading for the exit. No one gave us a second glance. The elevator doors opened, and as they closed behind us, I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with release. I was leaving behind more than a hospital room. I was leaving behind a lifetime of silence. Sarah, Rosa's sister, was waiting in the parking lot beside a dark sedan. She was a tall woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm presence. She greeted me with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Vera, I've prepared everything you'll need," she said. "This document gives Marina power of attorney over your affairs here. This one confirms you're of sound mind and acting of your own free will. Sign them both, and you'll be legally untouchable." I signed each paper with a steady hand. With every stroke of the pen, I felt a chain fall away. "And if they try to declare me incompetent?" I asked quietly. Sarah smiled faintly. "They won't succeed. I've taken precautions. You're an adult with every right to choose where and how you live." Marina squeezed my shoulder. "You're really doing this," she whispered. "I am," I said. "For the first time, I'm doing something for myself." The ride to the bus station was silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows. Streetlights glimmered like wet coins on the asphalt. As we drove past familiar blocks, I realized how little they meant to me now. Every corner held memories, but memories were no longer enough to keep me chained here. At the terminal, I bought a ticket for the night bus to Graymore. Departure at 10 p.m., arrival at 10 the next morning. Perfect timing. By the time my sons received the letter, I would already be breathing the salt air of a new life. We sat together in the waiting room as the minutes ticked by. Marina held my bag on her lap. Rosa handed me a small thermos of tea. "For the road," she said. I looked at both of them, these two women who had stepped into the role my own children had abandoned. "Thank you," I said simply. "You don't need to thank us," Marina replied. "You're choosing freedom." "That's something to admire," the loudspeaker announced my bus. My heart thudded once, then steadied. Marina stood, her eyes glistening. "Promise me you'll call when you arrive." "I promise," I said. We embraced tightly, a hug that felt more like family than anything I had known in years. I boarded the bus and found a seat by the window. As the engine rumbled to life, I pulled out my phone. I had decided to send one final message, not to explain, but to mark the end. Marcus, Adrian. By the time you read this, I will be far away. In my hospital bed, you will find a letter that explains everything. Do not look for me. This is my final decision. I pressed send, then switched off the phone. I did not want to see their replies. They had had a lifetime to show me their love. Tonight I was showing myself mine. The bus pulled away from the station, the city lights receding into a blur of gold and gray. Through the rain-streaked glass, I watched familiar streets vanish into the darkness. For the first time in decades, I was not afraid of what lay ahead. I was afraid only of looking back. And as the bus rolled deeper into the night, I could not have known that my disappearance would not only upend my sons' lives, but also uncover secrets they had worked hard to keep, hidden secrets that would soon reach me, even in Graymore. The bus rumbled through the night, like a ship cutting across dark waters. Outside the window, the city lights faded, and the landscape changed into endless stretches of wet highway, dotted with the occasional gas station glowing faintly in the rain. Most passengers slept, their heads bobbing with the motion, but I sat awake, my eyes fixed on the passing world. For the first time in decades, I was moving towards something unknown, and instead of fear, I felt an almost electric anticipation. I thought about the text message I had sent and imagined my sons reading it. Would they even notice it in time? Would they assume it was another one of my dramatic moments, as Clara used to call them? Or would they finally understand that this time I was serious? The thought should have made me sad, but it didn't. I felt strangely detached, as if I had finally placed the heavy weight of their expectations and judgments down on the floor and walked away. At some point I must have dozed off. When I opened my eyes again, dawn was breaking. The sky had shifted from black to deep blue, streaked with the pale orange of a new day. The rain had stopped, and sunlight was spilling across low hills and misty fields. We were close to the coast now. I could smell the faint tang of salt in the air, even through the bus's stale vents. Graymore Station appeared like something from a postcard, a small terminal with ivy climbing its stone walls and a single clock tower overlooking the platform. As the bus hissed to a stop, I clutched my bag and stood, my knees trembling, but not from weakness this time. It was excitement, freedom. When I stepped off the bus, the air hit me with its freshness. It was cool but gentle, carrying the scent of the ocean and blooming flowers. A line of gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and wild. After the gray, crowded city, Graymore felt like stepping into another world. Isabel was waiting at the edge of the platform. She looked almost the same as I remembered, tall, with silver hair pulled back into a braid, wearing a soft blue sweater that matched her clear eyes. She smiled when she saw me and hurried forward, opening her arms. "Elena," she said, hugging me tightly. "You're here. You're safe now." I hadn't realized how much I needed that simple gesture until tears filled my eyes. No questions, no judgment, just warmth. "I hope I'm not imposing," I murmured. "Nonsense," Isabel said firmly. "This house has been empty for too long. You'll bring life back into it." We walked together to her car, a weathered old station wagon that smelled faintly of lavender. The road to her home wound along the coastline. Through the window I saw cliffs plunging into the sea, small cottages with bright doors, fishermen mending nets on the shore. It was quiet but not lifeless, a kind of peace I had almost forgotten existed. Isabel's house sat on a hill above the harbor, a sprawling stone home with wide windows, and a garden spilling over with roses, jasmine, and a lemon tree whose scent drifted all the way to the porch. Inside, everything felt airy and light. My room overlooked the garden and had a bed with crisp white sheets and a window that opened to the sound of waves. "This will be your home for as long as you want it," Isabel said. "No deadlines, no rent. Just rest." That afternoon she prepared a meal of roasted fish and fresh bread, simple but delicious. We ate on the porch, the ocean sparkling below. As I ate, a thought came unbidden. This is what I should have been doing all along. Sitting somewhere warm, sharing food with someone who cares, not racing from job to job to prove my worth. Later, Isabel showed me around the town. Graymore was small but full of hidden life, an old market where women sold hand-woven baskets, a cultural center offering painting and dance classes, a park where people my age gathered every morning to walk and talk. Everywhere we went, people greeted Isabel by name, and she introduced me simply as her cousin from the city. No one asked for more. No one knew my story. For the first few days, I allowed myself to simply rest. I walked along the beach at sunrise, the sand cool beneath my feet, and breathed in the salt air until it felt like it was scrubbing my lungs clean. I sat in the garden under the lemon tree and let the sun warm my face. Each morning I felt a little stronger, as though every breath of ocean air stitched something back together inside me. But even as I settled into this new life, a faint unease began to creep at the edges. It started with small things, a phone call with no voice on the other end, a plain envelope slipped under Isabel's door containing nothing but a blank sheet of paper. Isabel dismissed it as a prank, but I wasn't so sure. One afternoon at the market, a man lingered near me as I browsed the stalls. He was in his late 40s with a weathered face and a cap pulled low over his brow. When I turned to look at him, he quickly pretended to examine a display of shells. Later, I thought I saw the same man leaning against a lamppost near Isabel's house smoking a cigarette. I told myself it was my imagination, a remnant of the city's constant tension, yet the feeling grew stronger each day. Someone knew I was here, someone who shouldn't. Meanwhile, my son's messages filled the phone I rarely turned on. At first, they were short-clipped. "Call us. We're worried." Then they became longer, more desperate. "Mom, this isn't funny. Please come home." Finally, they turned angry. "You're punishing us. You're being selfish. We'll find you." I didn't answer. I read them all, but I didn't answer. They had had a lifetime to call. They had had a lifetime to show up. Now I owed them nothing. Instead, I focused on small joys. I joined the morning walking group at the park, where women my age welcomed me without question. I helped Isabel with her garden, learning the names of each flower. I even signed up for a painting class at the cultural center. My first brush stroke across the canvas felt like a promise to myself. This is my life now. This is mine. And yet every time I returned to Isabel's house, I checked the porch for envelopes. I scanned the street for the man with the cap, and I began to wonder, was this just guilt chasing me? Or had my sons already set something in motion to track me down? One evening, as the sun dipped into the sea and the sky burned orange and pink, Isabel brought me a small package that had arrived by courier. "No return address," she said, handing it to me. The box was light wrapped in plain brown paper. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me sitting on the bench at Graymore Market 2 days earlier, a scarf around my shoulders looking out at the sea. On the back in neat handwriting were 5 words. "We know where you are." I stared at it, my pulse pounding. Isabel looked at me alarmed. "Elena, what is it?" I folded the photo back into the box. "It seems," I said slowly, "that my past isn't finished with me yet." The photograph sat on the table between Isabel and me, like a wound that refused to close. The image was simple me in Graymore Market, unaware sunlight catching the side of my face, but the message on the back turned it into something sinister. "We know where you are." For a long moment neither of us spoke. The only sound was the whisper of the sea through the open window. Finally, Isabel leaned forward and placed her hand over mine. "Elena, who would send this?" "My sons," I whispered. The words felt heavy in my mouth, though even as I said them I wasn't entirely convinced. Marcus and Adrian might be desperate, might be angry, but this message didn't sound like them. It was too deliberate, too cold. Or someone they hired, Isabel suggested. A private investigator, perhaps. They could have paid someone to track you down. The thought made my stomach twist. Had my sons already decided that my freedom was unacceptable? Did they really want me back in their lives, or did they just want to control the story? That night I lay awake in my new bed, listening to the waves crash against the cliffs. My mind replayed every word of the letter I had left behind, every page I had folded carefully into that envelope. It had been my goodbye, my declaration of independence. But perhaps I had underestimated how deeply guilt could sink its claws into someone. The next morning I turned on my phone for the first time in days. The screen lit up with dozens of messages and missed calls. "Marcus, Mom, we found your letter. How could you do this to us, Adrian? This isn't you. You're not thinking clearly. Call us. Clara, your disappearance is destroying Marcus. Do you really want that on your conscience, Celine? Please, Elena, for Adrian's sake, come back. He's falling apart. I scrolled further. The tone shifted as the days passed. Marcus again, if you don't come home, we'll make sure you're declared incompetent. Don't test us. Adrian, you're being cruel. You've always been dramatic, but this is too far. Finally, one last message from Marcus. We know you're in Graymore. You can't hide forever. My hands shook as I set the phone down. The photograph had not been an empty threat. They, or someone working for them, had truly found me. Isabel listened quietly as I read the messages aloud. She sipped her tea, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. They're panicking, she said. They've lost control, and people who thrive on control will do anything to regain it. I wanted to argue to insist that somewhere beneath the anger there was love, but the photograph on the table silenced me. Love would not have sent that. Days passed and the atmosphere in Graymore shifted. I began noticing the man with the cap again, always at a distance, always pretending to be part of the background. Once by the harbor, once outside the bakery, once leaning against a lamppost across from Isabel's garden. He never approached, never spoke, but his presence was a shadow that followed me everywhere. Meanwhile, my sons' voices grew louder in my mind. I imagined them pacing in their grand houses, arguing with their wives, calling lawyers. I pictured them holding my letter in their hands, their faces pale with fury. Did they regret what they had done, or did they only regret losing their grip on me? One afternoon, Marina called from the city. They came to see me, she said in a hushed voice. Both of them. They demanded to know where you were. My chest tightened. What did you tell them? The truth, she said firmly. That I don't know. They didn't like that answer. Marcus threatened me, said they'd find out one way or another. But I stood my ground. Tears pricked my eyes. Marina had always been stronger than she realized. Thank you, I whispered. Be careful, Elena, she said. They're desperate, and desperate people don't think clearly. Her warning echoed in my mind long after the call ended. That evening, Isabel and I walked down to the harbor. The sun was setting, painting the water in streaks of gold and crimson. Fishermen hauled in their nets, children ran along the pier, gulls circled overhead. Everything looked peaceful, but I felt anything but. My life was no longer a simple escape. It was becoming a game of pursuit. Do you regret it? Isabel asked quietly. I looked at the horizon, at the waves rolling endlessly toward the shore. No, I said. Not for a second. But I didn't think it would be this hard. I didn't think freedom would come with this much fear. Isabel nodded. That's how you know it's worth it. If it were easy, you would have done it years ago. Her words stayed with me. That night, I opened a new notebook and began writing again. Not another letter, not this time. This was for me. A record of everything I felt, every choice I made. If my children were determined to chase me, I wanted at least one place where my truth could not be twisted. The entries filled quickly. I wrote about the silence of the hospital, about the storm that mirrored my heart, about the moment I decided I deserved more than crumbs of love. I wrote about the bus ride, about Isabel's roses, about the photo on the table. Each word was a shield, each page a reminder that I was no longer theirs to command. And yet as I wrote, a question gnawed at me. Who had taken that photograph? Was it truly someone my sons had hired? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone with their own reasons for watching me. The mystery deepened when another package arrived a week later. This time inside the plain wrapping was not a photo, but a small silver locket. It was old, tarnished, and when I opened it, I froze. Inside was a picture of me younger, holding Marcus and Adrian as children. But on the opposite side was a man's face, a face I had not seen in over 30 years. Victor. My breath caught in my throat. My husband, the man who had abandoned us, the ghost who had haunted my sacrifices. What did this mean? Isabel leaned over my shoulder, her expression hardening. Elena, she said slowly, I don't think this is your sons at all. I think someone else has been waiting for you to resurface. I stared at the locket, my pulse thundering in my ears. The storm outside might have passed, but a new one was building. A storm tied not only to my sons, but to the past I thought I had buried forever. The locket lay in my hand. its silver chain coiled like a snake. I could not stop staring at the tiny photograph inside the face I had tried so hard to erase from memory. Victor, my husband, the man who had abandoned me decades ago. His smile in that faded image was almost mocking, as if he knew that even 30 years later he could still shatter me. I closed the locket and set it on the table, my fingers trembling. Isabel placed her hand gently on mine. "You don't think he sent this, do you?" she asked. "He disappeared," I whispered. "He built a new life somewhere far away. Why would he come back now?" But the truth was, I didn't know. I had not thought about Victor in years, and now suddenly here he was again, if not in person, then in shadow. Whoever had sent the locket wanted me to remember him, to feel unsettled, to question everything I thought I had escaped. For days the mystery of the package gnawed at me. I carried the locket in my pocket, unable to throw it away, unable to keep it close. It was both poison and proof, and I could not decide which. Meanwhile, life in Graymore continued around me. Isabel insisted that I join her in the daily rhythm of the town, that I not let fear lock me away. And so I did. In the mornings I walked through the park with the group of women who welcomed me as though I had always belonged. They told stories of their youth, laughed about their grandchildren, and shared recipes for soups and stews. They never pried into my past, and I never volunteered it. In the afternoons I went to the cultural center, where painting classes filled the rooms with the smell of turpentine and the sound of brushes scratching canvas. My hand shook at first, uncertain, but slowly the lines grew steadier, the colors brighter. I painted roses like the ones in Isabel's garden, gray seas that matched my moods, and once, without realizing it, I painted the face of a man I had not meant to remember. When I saw Victor's eyes staring back at me from the canvas, I nearly tore it apart. Instead, I covered it with a sheet and set it aside as if burying a ghost. It was during one of those afternoons at the center that I met Harland. He was a retired history teacher, a widower with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He introduced himself while I was rinsing my brushes, and we ended up walking together through the market afterward. He spoke easily, asking nothing of me, filling the air with stories of his students, his travels, the books he still loved to read. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a burden, not as a shadow of someone's mother, but as myself. Over the weeks, Harland and I grew closer. We met often for coffee at the seaside cafe, where gulls squawked and the waves crashed against the pier. He never pressed about my past, though. Once, when he saw the sadness flicker across my face, he said softly, "Whoever hurt you, Elena, they don't define you. Not anymore." Those words stayed with me. And yet, even as I began to rebuild something resembling a life, the shadows followed. The man with the cap appeared again, this time near the cultural center, watching from across the street. The photograph, the locket, the letters from my sons, all of it swirled together into a storm I could not escape. I started checking over my shoulder when I walked home, keeping the curtains drawn at night, locking the garden gate. Isabel noticed, of course. "You can't live like this," she said one evening as we sat in the garden. "If they've found you, you need to decide how to respond. Will you confront it, or will you keep running?" "I don't want to run anymore," I admitted. "But I don't know how to fight either. I've spent my whole life giving, not defending." Isabel studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time to learn." Her words planted a seed. I began small. I carried a notebook everywhere, recording details, the times I saw the man, the dates, the packages arrived, even the tone of my son's messages. It was part diary, part evidence, as if documenting the shadows could somehow strip them of power. The messages from Marcus and Adrian continued, growing more frantic. "Mom, we just want to talk. Come back and we'll fix this. Do you really want to end your life alone?" The guilt dripped from their words like venom. I ignored them. But one night, after a glass of wine loosened my defenses, I nearly wrote back. My finger hovered over the keys, ready to type something, anything. But then I remembered the hospital, the storm, the empty chair. I put the phone down and turned it off again. It was Harland who noticed the strain. One evening, as we walked along the beach, he stopped and turned to me. "You're carrying something heavy," he said. "If you don't share it, it will crush you." I wanted to tell him everything, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I said, "Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most." He nodded slowly, as though he understood more than I had said. "Then maybe it's time to choose different people to be close to." His kindness terrified me as much as it comforted me. I had spent so long believing I didn't deserve it that I couldn't quite accept it now. Still, Graymore gave me strength. The sea, the garden, the laughter of new friends, all of it began to mend the broken pieces of me. I started to believe I might really have a second chance, that perhaps the shadows would eventually lose interest and fade away. But then late one evening, another package arrived. This time it contained a single sheet of paper with just one sentence written on it. "You left once before. Do you really think you can leave again?" The handwriting was unfamiliar. It was not Marcus's, not Adrian's, not Victor's. It was someone else entirely. I stared at the words until they blurred. The sea roared in the distance, the wind rattled the windows, and in that moment I realized the truth. I had stepped into a new life, yes, but my old one was not done with me. Not yet. The note lay on the table, its single sentence digging into my mind like a thorn. "You left once before. Do you really think you can leave again?" The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and unknown. I read it over and over, my chest tightening with each repetition. Whoever had sent this knew more about me than they should. Isabel studied my face as I handed it to her. "This isn't from your sons," she said, her voice steady. "This is something else." "But who?" I whispered. "Who would want to haunt me like this after so many years?" Her eyes softened. "Elena, sometimes the past circles back when you least expect it. Perhaps this isn't about your sons at all. Perhaps this is about Victor." The name hung in the air between us like smoke. Victor. The man who had vanished, leaving me to raise 2 boys alone. For decades I had assumed he was gone for good. But the locket, the photograph, and now this note made me wonder, had he been watching all along? That night I barely slept. I kept hearing footsteps in the garden, the rustle of leaves, the echo of the waves crashing against the cliffs. Every sound seemed sharper, more threatening. I told myself it was only my imagination, but deep down I knew it was more than that. The shadows were pressing closer. The next morning Harland appeared at Isabel's gate. He carried a basket of oranges from his garden, his usual gift, but his eyes lingered on the envelope still lying on the porch. "What is it?" he asked gently. I hesitated, then told him everything: the letters, the photograph, the locket, the packages. His expression darkened as he listened. "You can't ignore this," he said. "Whoever is sending these things wants you to feel trapped. You must decide whether to hide or to face it. And how does one face ghosts?" I asked, my voice trembling. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "By refusing to let them control you." The words sank deep. For so long I had let others define me. First Victor, then my sons, then their wives. Always giving, always sacrificing, always bending, until there was nothing left of me. Perhaps it was time to stop bending. That evening I wrote a final entry in my notebook. Not to my sons, not to Victor, but to myself. I wrote about the girl I had once been, young and hopeful, dreaming of a life filled with love. I wrote about the woman who had endured decades of struggle, who had raised 2 boys into men even when they turned their backs on her. And I wrote about the woman I had become, the one who had finally chosen herself. When I set the pen down, a strange calm filled me. The following week the packages stopped. No more photographs, no more notes, no more shadows on the street corners. It was as if whoever had been watching me had grown bored, or perhaps they had realized that their attempts to frighten me no longer worked. My phone remained silent too. Marcus and Adrian's messages slowed, shifting from threats to silence. Maybe they had finally understood that I was serious. Slowly life in Graymore returned to its gentle rhythm. I joined Isabel at the morning markets. I painted seascapes in the afternoons. I shared quiet walks with Harland along the cliffs. The sea, constant and unchanging, reminded me that life moved forward whether we were ready or not. Months passed, and with each day the heaviness I had carried for so long began to lift. On my 69th birthday, Isabel organized a small gathering in her garden. Friends from the walking group came bringing cakes and flowers. Harland arrived with a book he thought I would love. They sang to me, their voices mingling with the sound of the waves, and for the first time in years I felt truly celebrated. Later that evening, as the lanterns glowed among the roses and the laughter of my new friends filled the air, I thought of my sons. I imagined them in their houses, surrounded by their own families, perhaps staring at the empty space where I used to be. Did they feel regret? Did they feel guilt? Or had they buried me in their minds as completely as I had removed them from my life? I realized then that it did not matter. For the first time in decades, their choices no longer defined me. That night, I stepped out onto the porch alone and looked out at the sea. The moonlight shimmered on the waves and the scent of jasmine floated on the breeze. I felt a sense of peace I had not known since I was a young woman. I whispered into the night, I am not your mother, your burden, or your shadow anymore. I am Elena, and that is enough. In the months that followed, I embraced the life I had once thought impossible. I painted, I danced, I laughed with Isabel, and I let Harlan's quiet companionship remind me that respect and kindness were still possible in this world. The scars of my past remained, but they no longer ruled me. They were simply part of the story, the chapters that had led me to this moment of freedom. One morning, as I sat in the garden with a cup of tea, Isabel asked, "Do you ever think you will forgive them?" I thought about it for a long time. Perhaps I said at last, "But forgiveness does not mean going back. It means moving forward without letting the anger weigh me down." And with those words, I finally understood. My life was not ending. It was beginning again. This story is about sacrifice, betrayal, and rebirth. Elena gave everything to her family and was left abandoned when she needed them most. Her journey shows that even after a lifetime of giving, it is never too late to choose yourself. Sometimes the bravest decision is to walk away from those who do not value you and create a new life where dignity and peace can finally exist. If Elena's story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. I would also love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Elena's place? Leave a comment below. I always enjoy reading your reflections.